Human nurse healed the alien king's wounds. The next day, 200 of his soldiers surrounded her pod. The storm had been the worst in 3 years. Amara pulled her torn jacket tighter as she picked through the wreckage scattered across the wasteland. Her boots crunched on twisted metal and shattered glass that glittered like deadly stars under the pale morning sun. The wind still carried the bitter smell of ozone and burned electronics, the signature of alien technology gone wrong. She shouldn't be out here alone. Everyone knew that. The elders back in Settlement 47 had made it clear, scavenging after alien crashes was suicide. But Amara's medical supplies were running dangerously low, and her 7-year-old daughter Emma had been coughing for weeks. Sometimes desperate mothers did desperate things. A piece of sleek, dark metal caught her eye. Unlike human technology, which was boxy and crude, this fragment curved like liquid shadow. Alien tech. Her heart hammered as she approached it, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The aliens rarely left survivors, but they also rarely left their technology behind. That's when she heard it, a low, pained groan that made her freeze. Someone's alive. Amara's first instinct was to run. Every survival lesson screamed at her to get back to the settlement, to report what she'd found, to let someone else deal with it. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and something deeper than fear stirred in her chest. She'd been a nurse before the world went to hell. Some instincts never died. She followed the sound through a maze of debris until she found him. The alien was half buried under the twisted remains of what looked like a small aircraft, a skimmer, she thought they called them. His body was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, with the characteristic gray-blue skin and angular features she'd seen in old military briefings. But unlike the monsters from the propaganda posters, this one looked vulnerable. Dark blood, so dark it was almost black, seeped from multiple wounds across his torso and arms. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and rapid. Dying. Amara crouched beside him, her medical training kicking in automatically. Punctured lung, possible internal bleeding, definitely going into shock. She'd seen these symptoms 1,000 times in human patients. Were alien bodies similar enough that her knowledge would help? This is insane, she told herself. He's the enemy. His people killed David. They destroyed half of America. The alien's eyes fluttered open. They were unlike anything she'd ever seen, deep violet, like the sky just before dawn, and filled with an intelligence that made her breath catch. He looked at her, confusion and pain warring in his expression. Then his hand moved, just slightly, towards something at his belt. Amara tensed, ready to bolt, but his fingers fell away before reaching whatever weapon he'd been grasping for. Too weak. Too hurt. Please, he whispered, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. His voice was deeper than any human's, with an odd harmonic quality that made the words seem to echo. But he'd spoken in perfect English. Help. Me. Every rational part of her mind screamed no. Aliens were monsters. They'd invaded Earth 50 years ago, destroyed the old governments, forced humanity into scattered settlements and underground colonies. They'd killed her husband David during the Atlanta massacre just 3 years ago, leaving her to raise Emma alone in this harsh world. But looking at him now, really looking, she couldn't see a monster. Just a living being in pain, asking for help. Before she could change her mind, Amara was moving. She grabbed his arms and began pulling, grunting with the effort. He was incredibly heavy, dense in a way that human bodies weren't. Each movement brought a soft moan of pain from his lips, but he was too weak to resist. It took her 20 minutes to drag him the half-mile to her survival pod. By the time she got him inside, they were both covered in that dark alien blood, and Amara was questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Her pod was small but well-equipped, a pre-war medical station that she'd managed to repair and modify over the years. It was her sanctuary, hidden in a grove of dead trees about 5 miles from the settlement. Emma stayed here when Amara went on dangerous scavenging runs like today's. She hoisted the alien onto her examination table, surprised again by his weight. Under the bright LED lights, she could see his injuries more clearly. 3 deep gashes across his chest, a puncture wound near his left shoulder, and something that looked like a burn across his right arm. The wounds were clean, too clean for a crash. These looked deliberate. Someone did this to him on purpose. As she worked, cleaning and stitching with supplies she couldn't afford to waste, Amara found herself studying his face. The bone structure was sharper than human, more angular, but there was something almost regal about it. His hair was longer than she'd expected, a deep black that seemed to absorb the light around it. And even unconscious, he carried himself with a kind of dignity that didn't match the simple, dark clothing he wore. Who was he? A soldier, obviously, but why had he been alone in that crashed skimmer? Where were his backup forces? In all the stories she'd heard, aliens traveled in groups, with heavy support and overwhelming firepower. This one seemed almost abandoned. It was nearly sunset by the time she finished patching him up. The alien, she really needed to start thinking of him as a person, not a thing, was stable but still unconscious. His breathing had evened out, and the bleeding had stopped. Whether he would survive the night was another question entirely. Amara sank into her chair, exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight. What had she done? If anyone from the settlement found out she was harboring an alien, they'd exile her at best. Kill her at worst. And Emma? What would happen to Emma? Outside, the first stars were becoming visible through the pod's small window. In a few hours, Emma would be back from her friend's house, asking questions that Amara wasn't ready to answer. The alien stirred on the table, violet eyes opening again. This time, they focused on her immediately, alert despite his injuries. "Thank you," he said quietly, and something in his tone made her believe he truly meant it. Amara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She'd made her choice. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. Neither of them knew that consequences were already on their way. 3 days passed before the alien could sit up without wincing. Amara had taken to calling him Kale after he'd mumbled the name during a fever dream on the second night. She wasn't even sure it was his real name, but it was better than the alien, or him. Emma had returned from her friend's house the morning after the rescue, and Amara had managed to convince her 7-year-old that Kale was just a very sick man who needed help. Children, thankfully, were more accepting than adults. "Tell me about the crash," Amara said, settling into the chair beside his makeshift bed. She'd moved him to the pod's small living area, where a fire crackled in the portable heater. Outside, rain drummed against the metal walls. Kale's violet eyes studied her face for a long moment before he answered. "Scouting mission," he said, his voice still rough but stronger than before. "My unit was tracking rebel movements near the northern settlements. We were ambushed." "Rebels?" Amara frowned. "You mean other aliens?" "Not all of my people support the current leadership," Kale said carefully. "There are factions who believe humans should be treated more harshly. Others who think we should withdraw from Earth entirely." The way he spoke was strange, formal, measured, like someone used to choosing words very carefully. Most of the aliens she'd heard about from other scavengers spoke in clipped, military phrases. Kale's sounded almost diplomatic. "And you?" she asked. "What do you believe?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I believe in doing what's right, even when it's difficult." Something in his tone made her think there was more to that story, but she didn't push. Instead, she handed him a cup of the thin soup she'd been feeding him. "What happened to the rest of your unit? Dead or scattered?" The word came out flat, emotionless, but she caught the brief flicker of pain in his eyes. "The rebels knew exactly where we'd be. Someone gave them our coordinates." "A traitor?" Yes, this time there was no mistaking the anger in his voice. "Someone I trusted." They fell into silence, watching the fire. Amara found herself studying his profile in the flickering light. Despite his alien features, there was something undeniably attractive about him. The strong jaw, the intelligent eyes, the way he carried himself even while injured. It was a dangerous thought, and she pushed it away. "Your daughter," Kale said suddenly. "Where is her father?" The question hit like a physical blow. Amara set down her own cup, hands trembling slightly. He's dead. Killed 3 years ago during an attack on Atlanta. One of your people's peacekeeping operations. She watched his face carefully, expecting indifference or perhaps defensive anger. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like shame. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Truly. Are you? The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Or is that just what you think I want to hear? Cale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I've seen too much senseless death in this war. From both sides. Your husband. He didn't deserve that. There was something in his tone, a weight, a responsibility, that made her look at him more closely. But before she could ask what he meant, Emma burst through the pod's door, shaking rain from her jacket. Mama, Mrs. Chen says people are talking about you in town, the little girl announced, completely unaware of the tension in the room. She says some people think you're up to something bad. Amara's blood went cold. What people, sweetheart? I don't know. But Mrs. Chen looked worried. Emma glanced at Cale with curious eyes. Are you feeling better, Mr. Cale? Much better, thanks to your mother, he replied, managing a small smile. She's an excellent healer. Emma beamed at the praise, but Amara barely heard it. If word was spreading in Settlement 47 that she was up to something, it was only a matter of time before someone came to investigate. The settlement's leader, Commander Hayes, had zero tolerance for alien sympathizers. After Emma went to bed, Amara paced the small living area while Cale watched from his chair by the fire. I should have thought this through, she muttered. Someone must have seen me dragging you back here. Or maybe they noticed I've been using extra medical supplies. You could turn me in, Cale said calmly. Tell them you were waiting for me to recover so you could interrogate me. They'd probably reward you. She stopped pacing to stare at him. Is that what you think of me? No, he said, meeting her eyes. I think you're someone who saves lives, even when it puts her own family at risk. It's admirable. And rare. Again, that formal way of speaking, like someone used to making pronouncements. And the way he said, rare, not like a soldier talking about a civilian, but like a leader evaluating a valuable trait in others. You're not just a scout, are you? She asked suddenly. For a split second, something like panic flashed across his features. Then it was gone, replaced by careful neutrality. What makes you say that? The way you talk. The way you carry yourself, even injured. And those wounds. She gestured at his bandaged chest. Those weren't from a crash. Someone tortured you. Cale's hand instinctively moved to his side, where the worst of the puncture wounds was still healing. I told you we were ambushed. By people who wanted information. Amara finished. Important information. The kind only someone with rank would have. They stared at each other across the small room, the fire crackling between them. Finally Cale sighed. You're right. I'm not just a scout. I'm an intelligence officer. I was investigating reports of rebel activity when they captured me. It felt like the truth, but not the whole truth. Amara could sense there was more he wasn't telling her. Still, she nodded. Well, intelligence officer or not, you need more time to heal. And I need to figure out how to keep us all alive. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and somewhere in Settlement 47, people were talking. Neither of them knew that by tomorrow morning, those whispers would reach very dangerous ears. Commander Hayes had ruled Settlement 47 with an iron fist for 15 years, ever since the last alien attack had left the previous leadership dead. His office walls were covered with maps, supply lists, and most prominently, a collection of alien weapons he'd personally taken from dead enemies. He was studying patrol schedules when Marcus Webb knocked on his door. Come in, Hayes barked, not looking up from his papers. Webb slipped inside, nervous energy radiating from his thin frame. At 19, he was one of the settlement's most eager scouts, and biggest gossips. Commander, I've got something you need to hear. This better be important, Webb. I've got supply runs to plan. It's about Amara Collins, sir. The nurse who lives out in the old medical pod. Hayes looked up then, his weathered face showing interest. Everyone knew Amara. She'd saved dozens of lives over the years, including his own grandson. But lately, there had been whispers. What about her? Webb shifted his weight, clearly enjoying being the bearer of important news. I was doing my usual perimeter check yesterday morning, and I saw something strange through her window. A man, sir? But not like any man I've ever seen. Explain. Tall, really tall. And his skin? It looked gray-blue, sir. Like in the old military photos. Webb leaned forward, lowering his voice. I think she's hiding an alien. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Amara Collins was one of their most valuable citizens, a skilled medic in a world where doctors were worth their weight in gold. But harboring an alien? That was treason of the highest order. You're certain of what you saw? Yes, sir. I watched for almost an hour. He was moving around talking to her. Definitely not human. Hayes reached for his communication device. Get me patrol teams 3 and 5. Full weapons load. We move at first light. 15 miles above the planet's surface, General Vex studied the holographic display floating before him. The signal was weak but unmistakable, a distress beacon from a royal escape pod, broadcasting on the highest priority frequency. My lord, his aide whispered. Are you certain the beacon is genuine? Vex's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. Unlike most of his species, he bore ritual scars across his jaw, marks of the old ways from before the monarchy had softened their people. Oh, it's genuine. And it means our missing king is alive but wounded. Perfect. The ship's bridge hummed with activity as crew members prepared for atmospheric entry. This was the moment Vex had been planning for months, the chance to capture King Kale and use him as leverage to seize the throne. The royal bloodline would bend to his will, or it would end with him. Sir, we've triangulated the signal's source, reported his navigation officer. Small human settlement, designation 47. The beacon appears to be coming from an isolated structure approximately 5 kilometers from the main population center. Excellent. Deploy advanced scouts to confirm the target's location. I want him alive, but don't hesitate to eliminate any human witnesses. Vex turned to face his assembled commanders, each one hand-picked for their loyalty to his cause. Today, we changed the course of 2 worlds. In her pod, Amara felt the familiar weight of dread settling in her stomach. Emma had been chattering about her day at the settlement school, but her words kept circling back to the same troubling theme. Mrs. Peterson asked me lots of questions about you today, Mama. About whether you've been acting strange lately. And Tommy's dad said you've been buying weird supplies from the market. Kale, who had been quietly working on some mechanical device he'd salvaged from his crashed skimmer, looked up with sharp attention. What kind of questions? Just questions, Emma said, suddenly shy around the tall stranger who still made her nervous despite 3 days of kindness. About whether Mama brings strangers home. Whether she goes places she shouldn't. Amara knelt beside her daughter's chair. Emma, sweetheart, I need you to listen carefully. If anyone asks you about our guest, what do you tell them? That he's just a sick man who needed help. Emma recited. They'd practiced this conversation twice already. Good girl. Now go wash up for dinner. As Emma disappeared into the pod's tiny bathroom, Kale set down his work. The device looked almost complete, some kind of communication unit, Amara realized. We need to leave, he said quietly. Tonight. This is my home. Emma's home. I won't run just because some people are asking questions. You don't understand. Kale's voice carried an urgency she hadn't heard before. If they've identified me as alien, they won't just ask questions. Humans don't take prisoners in this war, they never have. Before Amara could respond, a low vibration thrummed through the pod's walls. Both of them froze, listening. The sound came again, mechanical, purposeful, growing stronger. Aircraft. Kale breathed, moving to the window with surprising speed for someone still recovering from major injuries. Multiple contacts, approaching from the north. Amara joined him, her heart hammering. In the distance, she could see lights moving through the darkening sky, not the steady glow of human aircraft, but the pulsing, organic patterns of alien technology. Friends of yours? She asked, though something in Cale's expression told her she already knew the answer. No, his hands were working frantically on his communication device now, fingers dancing over alien symbols that meant nothing to Amara. The people who did this to me, they've found us. How is that possible? Emergency beacon, he said grimly. Built into the escape pod's life support systems. I thought I'd disabled it, but... He gestured helplessly at his bandaged torso. I was somewhat distracted at the time. The alien aircraft were closer now, close enough that Amara could make out individual ships, sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to cut through the air like knives. At the same time, she could hear another sound growing in the distance, the roar of human vehicles approaching from the south. Settlement 47's patrol teams. We're trapped, she whispered. Cale's communication device suddenly chimed to life, projecting a small holographic display. Alien text scrolled across it too quickly for Amara to follow, but Cale's face went pale as he read. What is it? A message from my enemies. They know I'm here, and they know I'm injured. They're giving me 1 hour to surrender myself, or they'll destroy the entire human settlement. His violet eyes met hers, filled with an anguish she hadn't seen before. I'm so sorry, Amara. You saved my life, and now I've brought death to your people. Outside, the lights were getting brighter, and Amara could hear the sound of human voices shouting orders as Commander Hayes's forces took positions around her pod. Dawn was still hours away, but their quiet sanctuary was about to become a battlefield. The night stretched endlessly as Amara held Emma close, both of them huddled in the pod's back room while Cale kept watch at the window. Outside, she could hear Commander Hayes's men taking positions, the scrape of boots on stone, the metallic click of weapons being readied. Above them, the alien ships circled like vultures, their lights casting eerie shadows through the darkness. Mama, I'm scared, Emma whispered against her shoulder. I know, baby. But we're going to be okay. The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. Cale had barely moved from his position in hours, his communication device clutched in one hand while he monitored both approaching forces. Every few minutes, it would pulse with new messages that made his jaw tighten further. He tried to explain the tactical situation, but Amara understood the basics. They were caught between two armies that wanted him for very different reasons. As the first pale light of dawn crept across the horizon, everything changed. The ground began to tremble. It started as a subtle vibration, like distant thunder, but quickly grew stronger. Emma whimpered and pressed closer to Amara as the pod's walls shuddered. Through the window, they could see Commander Hayes's men looking around in confusion, their weapons forgotten as they struggled to keep their footing. What's happening? Amara called to Cale. His face was grim as he stared at the sky. My people are making a statement. The trembling intensified, and then the sun seemed to disappear. Massive shadows fell across the landscape as enormous ships descended from the upper atmosphere, not the sleek attack craft from last night, but true warships the size of city blocks. Their hulls were a dark metal that seemed to drink in the light, covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Amara counted 3, then 5, then lost track as more kept appearing. Dear God, she breathed. The ships settled into position with impossible grace for something so large, forming a perfect circle around Amara's pod. As they landed, thousands of smaller craft poured from their holds like insects from a disturbed nest. The air filled with the hum of anti-gravity engines and the harsh bark of alien voices issuing commands. Through the chaos, Amara could see Commander Hayes's patrol teams retreating in panic. These men had trained to fight small raiding parties, not a full invasion force. They were hopelessly outmatched. But the alien forces weren't pursuing them. Instead, they formed precise ranks around the pod, their movements coordinated with military precision. Amara counted the soldiers as they took position, dozens, then hundreds. 200 at least, all armed with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "Cale," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What's happening?" He turned from the window, and she was shocked to see how much he'd changed. The wounded, vulnerable man she'd been caring for was gone. In his place stood someone else entirely, someone who carried himself with absolute authority despite his simple clothes. "It's time," he said quietly. Before she could ask what he meant, Cale was moving toward the pod's door. Amara grabbed his arm. "You can't go out there. They'll kill you." "No," he said, gently removing her hand. "They won't." He opened the door and stepped outside into the pale dawn light. Amara followed despite every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Emma clinging to her side. The sight that greeted them was beyond anything she could have imagined. Hundreds of alien soldiers stood in perfect formation, their weapons lowered but ready. The massive warships loomed overhead like metal mountains, their shadows stretching for miles. And in the center of it all, Cale walked forward with steady, measured steps. As he reached the nearest group of soldiers, something extraordinary happened. They knelt. One by one, starting with those closest to him, the alien warriors dropped to one knee. The movement rippled outward through their ranks like a wave, until every single soldier was bowing before the man Amara had found bleeding in the wreckage just 4 days ago. "What?" she started to say, but the words died in her throat as Cale reached up to unfasten his simple, dark cloak. The garment fell away, revealing clothing underneath that gleamed like liquid starlight. Intricate patterns were woven into the fabric, not decorative, but clearly significant. Royal insignia, she realized with growing shock. And at his throat, a pendant that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its depths. When he turned back to face her, Cale's entire bearing had transformed. This was not the wounded scout she nursed back to health. This was someone accustomed to being obeyed, someone whose very presence commanded respect from armies. "Amara," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent battlefield. "I need to tell you the truth." She couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Emma's small hand squeezed hers tighter. "My name is Cale Thyss Vorthak, and I am king of the Zephyrian Empire." The formal words rang with absolute certainty. "I was not on a scouting mission. I was investigating reports of treason within my own inner circle, traveling in disguise to identify which of my generals had been feeding information to rebel forces." The world seemed to tilt sideways. You're the king?" "The mission went wrong. I was betrayed by someone I trusted completely, captured, and tortured for information about our military strategies. I escaped, crashed my ship, and would have died if not for your kindness." His violet eyes never left her face. "You saved the life of the ruler of half the galaxy, Amara. And in doing so, you've changed both our destinies forever." Around them, the alien soldiers remained kneeling, waiting for orders from their sovereign. In the distance, she could see human vehicles fleeing toward Settlement 47, carrying news that would spread like wildfire. The alien king had been found, hidden by one of their own. Amara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, not from the massive ships, but from the realization of what she'd done. Her simple act of compassion, saving a wounded stranger, had thrust her family into the center of intergalactic politics overnight. "I trusted you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought you were just a soldier." "I know. And I'm sorry for the deception. But Amara..." He stepped closer, his expression softening slightly. "Everything else was real. My gratitude, our conversations, the way I..." He stopped himself. "The way I've come to care for you and Emma." Before she could respond, new ships appeared on the horizon. Smaller, more aggressive, moving fast. The rebel forces were making their move, and the morning sun was about to witness a battle that would reshape 2 worlds. The flagship's interior was nothing like Amara had expected. Instead of cold metal corridors and harsh lighting, she found herself walking through spaces that seemed carved from living stone, with soft bioluminescent panels that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. The air itself felt different, cleaner somehow, with an almost floral scent that reminded her of Earth's forests before the war. Emma pressed close to her side, wide-eyed at everything they passed. Alien crew members paused in their duties to bow deeply as King Kale, she was still struggling to think of him that way, led them through the ship. Their violet eyes tracked Amara and Emma with unmistakable curiosity, but none dared speak. "The royal quarters are this way," Kale said, his voice formal now that they were surrounded by his people. He'd resumed wearing his ceremonial garments, and the transformation was still jarring. This was not the vulnerable man she'd nursed back to health. They entered a vast chamber with curved walls that displayed what looked like real-time images of space, stars wheeling slowly past, other ships in the fleet maintaining formation. A massive conference table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs that seemed to grow from the floor itself. "You'll be safe here," Kale continued, but his words were interrupted by the arrival of 3 alien figures who strode into the room with obvious authority. The lead figure was tall even by Zephyrian standards, with ritual scars covering half his face and armor that gleamed like black ice. His eyes fixed on Amara with unmistakable hostility. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice dripping with barely controlled disdain. "I am General Thane, your military advisor. Perhaps you could explain why humans have been brought aboard the flagship? General Thane, may I present Amara Collins, the healer who saved my life?" Kale's tone was carefully neutral. "She and her daughter are under my personal protection." "A human," spat the second general, a female with silver markings along her temples. "On the bridge of our most sacred vessel. This is unprecedented, my lord." "Dangerous. Everything about this situation is unprecedented, General Lixa," Kale replied coolly. "Including the fact that someone in my inner circle betrayed me to the rebels. Until I determine who that someone is, I trust very few people." The third general, older and more scarred than the others, stepped forward. "My king, surely you cannot be suggesting that one of us." "I'm not suggesting anything, General Kor. I'm stating facts." Kale moved to the great window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Someone knew my exact route. Someone knew the codes to disable my ship's defenses. Someone wanted me captured alive." He turned back to face them, his violet eyes hard as stone. "The question is, which of you was it?" The silence that followed was electric with tension. Amara could practically feel the hostility radiating from the 3 generals, not just toward their king's accusations, but toward her presence as witness to this royal drama. "This discussion should be held in private," General Thane said finally. "Without outside observers. The human stays," Kale said with finality. "She has proven her loyalty to me. Can any of you say the same?" After the generals left, their departure marked by stiff bows and barely concealed rage, Kale seemed to deflate slightly. The royal bearing remained, but Amara caught glimpses of the wounded man she'd cared for. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said, settling into one of the strange chairs. "Court politics can be intense." "Court politics?" Amara sat across from him, Emma curled up in her lap. "That felt more like a threat." "Because it was." Kale's expression was grim. "Bringing you here has upset a very delicate balance of power. Many of my people believe humans are inferior beings who should be conquered completely or eliminated entirely. The idea of a human being granted royal protection makes me a target," Amara finished. "And you're just now thinking to mention this? Would you have preferred I left you on the planet? Because by now, your fellow humans have decided you're a traitor who sold them out to the aliens." At her shocked expression, he activated a holographic display that showed aerial views of Settlement 47. "Commander Hayes has declared martial law. They're searching every building, questioning every citizen about your collaboration with enemy forces." The images were devastating. Amara could see people she'd known for years being herded into the town square, their faces full of fear and anger. A banner had been strung across the settlement's main gate. "Death to alien collaborators. They think I betrayed them," she whispered. "You saved a life," Kale corrected. "But in wartime, compassion is often mistaken for treason." Emma had fallen asleep in Amara's arms, exhausted by the day's upheavals. As Amara gently stroked her daughter's hair, she felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. Her old life was gone, destroyed not by her actions, but by other people's reactions to them. "During your recovery," she said quietly, "you talked in your sleep sometimes. Fevered ramblings, mostly, but—" She looked up at him. "You mentioned names, places, details about troop movements and supply lines." Cale straightened, suddenly alert. "What exactly did I say?" "General Vex was mentioned several times. And something about the northern offensive being moved up by 3 cycles. You seemed very distressed about it." She paused, studying his face. "At the time, I thought you were just reliving battle memories. But if someone in your inner circle is feeding information to rebels—" "General Vex," Cale's voice was barely a whisper. "He's not here. He should have been part of my rescue force, but he's claimed to be dealing with urgent matters elsewhere." "You think he's the traitor?" "I think he's the one who ordered my capture. Vex has been pushing for a more aggressive campaign against human settlements. If he could prove that I'd been compromised by human influence," Cale gestured toward Amara, "it would give him justification to remove me from power." The ship's communication system chimed softly, and a new holographic display materialized. An alien face appeared, sharp features, cold eyes, and a smile that held no warmth. "My dear King Cale," the figure said, and even through the translation system, his voice dripped with false concern. "How delighted I am to see you've recovered from your accident. I trust the human healer has been adequately compensated for her services?" Cale's jaw clenched. "General Vex, I was wondering when you'd make contact." "Oh, I've been terribly busy, I'm afraid. Coordinating search efforts, managing the crisis your disappearance caused. But now that you're safe—" Vex's eyes seemed to look directly at Amara through the projection. "I do hope you haven't allowed sentiment to cloud your judgment regarding security protocols." "My judgment is perfectly clear, General." "Excellent. Then you'll understand why the High Council has requested an immediate review of recent events. There are concerns about potential compromises to royal security." The smile widened. "I'm sure a thorough investigation will clear up any misunderstandings." The transmission ended, leaving them in heavy silence. "He's making his move," Cale said finally. "Using my rescue by a human as evidence that I've been compromised. If the High Council believes him, what happens then?" Cale's violet eyes met hers, filled with a terrible certainty. "Then they'll remove me from the throne. And Vex will have the war he's always wanted." Outside the flagship's windows, the stars wheeled on, indifferent to the fate of worlds hanging in the balance. The attack came at dawn, just as the flagship's artificial morning cycle began to brighten the royal quarters. Amara was helping Emma eat breakfast, strange but surprisingly tasty alien fruit that tasted like a cross between oranges and honey, when the ship lurched violently to one side. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the vessel, their harsh alien tones making Emma clap her hands over her ears. "What's happening?" Amara called over the noise, but Cale was already moving toward the communication console, his face grim. The main display flickered to life, showing the space around their fleet. Dozens of rebel ships had appeared seemingly from nowhere, their sleek forms darting between the royal vessels like predators among whales. Explosions bloomed in the darkness as energy weapons found their targets. "Stealth assault," Cale muttered, his fingers dancing over alien controls. "Vex is moving faster than I expected." General Thane's scarred face appeared on the screen, his usual hostility replaced by urgent professionalism. "My lord, we're under coordinated attack from multiple vectors. The rebels are using some kind of cloaking technology. Our sensors didn't detect them until they were practically on top of us." "How did they get so close?" Cale demanded. "Unknown, sire. But the attack patterns suggest they have detailed intelligence about our defensive formations." Thane's eyes flickered toward Amara with obvious accusation. Before Cale could respond, the ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and Amara could hear the distant sound of hull breaches being sealed. "Mama?" Emma's voice was small and frightened. It's okay, baby. Amara lied, pulling her daughter close. We're safe here. But they weren't safe. Even as the words left her mouth, she could see from Cale's expression that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The royal fleet had been caught completely off guard, their massive ships too slow to respond effectively to the rebels' hit-and-run tactics. My lord, came another voice through the communicator, General Kor this time. Enemy boarding craft have attached to the port side of the flagship. They're cutting through the hull. Cale's face went pale. Evacuate the royal quarters. Get security teams to. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but in that brief darkness, everything changed. When the dim backup illumination flickered on, Amara heard Emma scream. 3 figures in black armor had materialized in the chamber, rebels using some kind of personal stealth technology. One held Emma in a crushing grip, a wickedly curved blade pressed to her throat. Let her go! Amara lunged forward, but the second rebel caught her arm, twisting it behind her back until she cried out in pain. Your Majesty, the third rebel said, his voice mechanically distorted by his helmet. General Vex sends his regards. Cale raised his hands slowly, his violet eyes fixed on the knife at Emma's throat. What do you want? The little human comes with us. Insurance, you might say. No, the word came out like a growl. She's an innocent child. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. The rebel holding Emma pressed the blade slightly closer to her skin, drawing a thin line of blood. Emma whimpered but didn't struggle, smart enough to understand her danger. She represents everything wrong with your reign, your weakness for these inferior creatures. Amara watched in helpless rage as they activated some kind of teleportation device. Emma reached out toward her, tears streaming down her small face. Mama! And then they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Amara collapsed to her knees, her whole body shaking with fury and terror. Her baby, her 7-year-old daughter, was in the hands of monsters who saw her as nothing more than a bargaining chip. I'll get her back, Cale said, his voice rough with emotion. I swear to you, Amara, I'll. The main display crackled to life, showing General Vex's cold smile. Behind him, Amara could see Emma bound to a chair, alive but clearly terrified. My dear king, Vex said with mock courtesy. I trust you received our message? The child is unharmed for now. But her continued health depends entirely on your cooperation. What do you want? Cale's words were ice. Simple. Abdicate the throne. Acknowledge that your judgment has been compromised by human influence, and step down in favor of more capable leadership. Vex's smile widened. Do this within 12 hours, and the child will be returned to her mother unharmed. Refuse, and well. He gestured casually toward Emma. Humans are so fragile, aren't they? The transmission ended. Amara stared at the blank screen, her mind reeling. This was her fault. If she hadn't saved Cale, if she hadn't gotten involved in alien politics, Emma would still be safe. Her daughter was paying the price for her mother's compassion. This is because of me, she whispered. They took her because of me. No, Cale knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. They took her because Vex is a coward who targets the innocent. Because he knows that threatening a child is the one thing that might make me act without thinking. Then give him what he wants. Step down, do whatever, just get Emma back. If I abdicate under these circumstances, it won't just mean losing my throne. Cale's violet eyes were filled with pain. It will mean civil war. Vex will purge anyone loyal to the old ways, and then he'll turn his full attention to conquering Earth completely. Billions will die. Amara looked up at him, seeing the impossible choice written across his alien features. Save one child, or save 2 worlds. What kind of decision was that for anyone to make? There has to be another way, she said desperately. There is. Cale's voice was quiet, but she heard the steel beneath it. But it's dangerous. If we're caught. Tell me. Vex wants me to act emotionally, to make mistakes because I care about you and Emma. He met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. He's right about one thing: I do care. More than I should, more than is wise for a king. But that also gives us an advantage he doesn't expect. What do you mean? He thinks I'll try to mount a direct rescue, using royal forces. That's what any rational king would do, what I should do. Cale stood, pacing to the window where battle still raged in the space beyond. But I won't risk Emma's life on a military assault. Instead, I'll give him exactly what he wants to see, a king compromised by human emotions. Understanding dawned. You want to use me as bait. I want you to help me convince Vex that he's won. That I'm willing to negotiate privately, away from my generals and advisors. If we can get him to bring Emma to a meeting, you can spring a trap. Amara felt a spark of hope for the first time since Emma had vanished. But why would he believe I'd cooperate? My daughter's life is at stake. Cale turned back to her, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression, a glimpse of the wounded man she'd first saved. Because, he said quietly, he'll believe that you're willing to sacrifice anything for the person you love. Just as I am. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Outside, the battle continued to rage, but inside the royal quarters, two people from different worlds prepared to risk everything for a 7-year-old girl who had become the key to both their destinies. The plan was insane. Amara adjusted the stolen rebel uniform, black armor that felt alien against her skin, and checked the small communication device Cale had given her one last time. She was crouched in the maintenance tunnel of an abandoned mining station, just 50 meters from where Emma was being held. The rebels had chosen their hideout well, an old human facility, gutted and modified with alien technology, hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Can you hear me? Cale's voice came through the earpiece, barely a whisper. Yes, she breathed back. I can see Emma through the grating. She's alive, but scared. Remember, wait for my signal. Don't move until you hear the explosions. Amara's heart hammered as she watched her daughter through the metal slats. Emma sat in a chair in the center of a makeshift command room, surrounded by rebel guards. She looked so small, so fragile, but her chin was raised defiantly, David's stubborn streak showing through despite her fear. Hold on, baby. Mama's coming. 3 decks above, Cale was playing his role perfectly. Through her earpiece, Amara could hear him addressing General Vex over the communication system, his voice heavy with defeat. I accept your terms, Cale said. I'll abdicate, but I want guarantees. The human child and her mother go free, unharmed. Of course, my lord. Vex's voice dripped with false sympathy. You have my word. Though I must say, it's unfortunate that it came to this. If only you hadn't allowed sentiment to cloud your judgment. The throne is yours, Vex. Just don't hurt them. Amara could hear the manufactured desperation in Cale's voice and marveled at his acting ability. To anyone listening, he sounded like a broken king, ready to surrender everything for love. Which, she realized with a start, might not be entirely an act. Excellent, Vex continued. Bring the human woman to my ship for the formal ceremony. I want the entire fleet to witness your abdication, and the reason for it. Understood. I'll dock in 30 minutes. The transmission ended, and Amara tensed. This was it. Cale's ship would approach Vex's vessel, seemingly carrying a defeated king ready to surrender. But hidden in the cargo hold were 50 of his most loyal soldiers, volunteers who had sworn to follow their king even into this desperate gamble. Phase 1 complete, came Cale's voice in her ear. Moving to intercept. Remember, Amara, the moment you hear fighting on the main deck, you move. Get Emma and get to the escape pods. What about you? Don't worry about me. Just save your daughter. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Amara watched the guards through the grating, memorizing their positions, their weapons, their patrol patterns. Emma had stopped struggling and was now sitting very still, her young mind probably processing everything she'd overheard about kings and abdications and political coups. Then, in the distance, she heard it, the deep boom of an explosion, followed by the harsh klaxons of a ship under attack. The guards around Emma immediately went on high alert, speaking rapidly into their communicators. Through the chaos of voices, Amara caught fragments. Under attack. Security breach. The king's forces. One of the guards spoke loudly enough for her to understand clearly. General Thane, we need reinforcements in Sector 7. The king's soldiers are. Amara froze. General Thane? But Thane was supposed to be loyal to Kale. Unless. Dear God. Thane is the real traitor. Her mind raced as the pieces fell into place. Vex had been the obvious suspect, the public face of the rebellion. But Thane, scarred, decorated General Thane, had been feeding information to the rebels all along, using Vex as a front while he orchestrated everything from within Kale's inner circle. More explosions echoed through the station, closer now. The guards were getting nervous, dividing their attention between watching Emma and monitoring the battle reports. This was her chance. Amara kicked out the grating and dropped into the room. The first guard turned toward the noise, but she was already moving, using every bit of self-defense training David had insisted she learned years ago. The stolen rebel armor gave her protection and, crucially, a moment of confusion as the guards tried to figure out if she was friend or foe. She tackled the guard nearest Emma, wrestling his weapon away as her daughter screamed. The second guard raised his rifle, but Emma, brave, brilliant Emma, threw herself sideways in her chair, tipping it over and giving Amara a clear shot. The energy blast took the guard down, but the noise brought reinforcements. Amara cut Emma's bonds with the fallen guard's knife, pulling her daughter close. "Mama!" Emma sobbed against her shoulder. "I've got you, baby. But we have to run. Now." They made it to the corridor before running into General Thane himself, flanked by a squad of rebel soldiers. His scarred face showed no surprise at seeing them, only cold calculation. "The human healer," he said conversationally. "How resourceful. I must admit, I didn't expect you to make it this far." "You're the traitor," Amara said, pushing Emma behind her. "Not Vex. Vex is a useful fool, nothing more. He thinks he's leading this rebellion, but he's simply the face I needed to keep suspicion off myself." Thane's smile was cruel. "Did you really think I would allow our people to be ruled by a king who shows weakness to humans? Who brings your kind aboard our sacred vessels? Kale trusted you. Kale is a sentimental child playing at being king. Our empire needs strength, not compassion." Thane raised his weapon. "Your interference ends here." The shot never came. Instead, the wall beside them exploded inward, and Kale himself stepped through the breach, flanked by loyal soldiers. His face was magnificent in its fury, violet eyes blazing with royal wrath. "General Thane," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "You are relieved of duty." The battle that followed was swift and brutal. Thane's rebels, caught between Kale's forces and the station's structural collapse, surrendered within minutes. But Thane himself fought to the end, his scarred face twisted with fanatic hatred as he fell. As the dust settled, Amara found herself and Emma surrounded by kneeling alien soldiers, not in threat, but in respect. Word had already spread through both fleets about the human woman who had infiltrated an enemy stronghold to save her child, whose courage had helped expose the true traitor threatening their king. "The human showed honor beyond her species," one soldier murmured to another. "She fought like a true warrior. She risked everything for those she loves," added another. "Perhaps our king was right about her worthiness." Kale approached them slowly, his royal bearing intact but his eyes soft with relief. "Are you both unhurt?" Emma nodded, still clinging to Amara but no longer afraid of the tall alien king. "You came for us," she said simply. "Always," Kale replied, and something in his tone made Amara's breath catch. As they prepared to return to the flagship, Amara overheard more conversations among the alien crew. The story was spreading, growing with each telling. The human woman who had saved their king's life, earned his trust, and fought beside him against traitors. Many were calling for her elevation to royal status. Others demanded she be granted citizenship and honors. All agreed that she had proven herself worthy of respect. But as Amara looked at Kale's face in the aftermath of battle, she realized the most important question wasn't what his people thought of her. It was what he was prepared to offer, and what she was brave enough to accept. The throne room of the Zephyrian flagship was vast beyond imagination, its crystalline walls rising into shadows that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Amara had never seen anything so beautiful, or so intimidating. Hundreds of alien nobles filled the space, their ceremonial robes shimmering in the bioluminescent light, all eyes focused on the raised platform where she stood beside King Kale. 3 days had passed since the rescue at the mining station. 3 days since General Thane's treachery had been exposed and the rebellion crushed. Now, with the immediate crisis over, harder questions had emerged, questions about Amara's place in this alien world, and what her relationship with their king meant for the future of two civilizations. Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire. Kale's voice carried easily through the vast chamber, amplified by technology she couldn't begin to understand. We gather today not only to celebrate victory over those who would have destroyed our unity, but to address a matter of great importance to our realm. Emma sat in a place of honor near the throne, wearing a small dress that had been crafted for her by the royal tailors. The 7-year-old was wide-eyed at the spectacle, but she no longer seemed afraid. Over the past 3 days, she charmed half the ship's crew with her curiosity and fearless questions about alien technology. The human woman Amara Collins risked her life to preserve our peace, Kale continued. She saved not only my life, but the stability of our empire. Her courage in the face of overwhelming danger has proven that honor and nobility are not limited to any single species. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd, not all of them approving. Amara could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes, some curious, some respectful, others openly hostile. She was an outsider here, a representative of a species many still considered inferior. Therefore, Kale said, and the chamber fell silent, I have decided to offer Amara Collins the position of royal consort, with all the rights, privileges, and protections that title entails. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Some nobles dropped to one knee in acceptance, while others began talking among themselves in heated whispers. Amara felt her knees go weak. Royal consort, it was beyond anything she could have imagined. Kale turned to her, his violet eyes soft despite the formal setting. Amara, this offer comes with no pressure and no expectation. But if you accept, you and Emma will never want for anything. You'll have a voice in the governance of the Empire, protection from any who would harm you, and— he paused, his formal mask slipping slightly. You'll have my heart if you'll accept it. The throne room faded around them. In that moment, there was only Kale, not the alien king, not the ruler of half the galaxy, but the wounded man she'd found in the wreckage, who trusted her with his pain and his secrets. I need to know what this really means, she said quietly. For Emma. For my people. Emma would be raised as royal family, educated in both human and Zephyrian culture. She would lack for nothing, and when she comes of age, she could choose her own path, diplomat, explorer, anything she desires. Kale's voice grew more serious. As for your people, this union would signal a new era. Not conquest or subjugation, but partnership. The beginning of true peace between our worlds. Amara looked out at the assembled nobles, then down at Emma, who was watching her with complete trust. Her daughter had already lost one parent to this endless war. If Amara accepted this offer, Emma would gain not just security but a chance at a future neither of them had dared to dream. But accepting meant leaving Earth forever. It meant living under constant scrutiny. Her every action weighed for its political implications. It meant giving up the simple life she'd built in Settlement 47, trading freedom for responsibility on an unimaginable scale. There's something else, Kale said, reading her hesitation. I won't lie to you about the challenges. There will be those who question your presence here, who see you as a symbol of weakness. Court life can be brutal, and you'll face opposition from nobles who believe humans have no place in our hierarchy. And if I say no, then you and Emma return to Earth with my protection and my gratitude. No one will harm you, I guarantee it. You'll have resources to build whatever life you choose. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the pain he was trying to hide. The choice is yours, Amara. It always has been. She closed her eyes, thinking of David, of the life they'd planned together before the war changed everything. He would have wanted Emma to be safe, to have opportunities he could never give her. And Amara. She'd found something with Cale that she'd never expected to feel again. Not just attraction, but understanding. Respect. Love. I have conditions, she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. Hope flickered across his alien features. Name them. Emma gets to visit Earth regularly. I won't have her lose touch with her human heritage. Agreed. And I want regular diplomatic contact with human settlements. If I'm going to represent my people in your court, I need to understand their needs. Of course. And she took a deep breath, looking directly into those violet eyes. I'm not accepting this for power or position. I'm accepting because somewhere between saving your life and fighting for my daughter, I fell in love with a king who sees past the differences between our species. Cale's smile was radiant. Then you'll accept? I accept. The throne room erupted in a mixture of cheers and formal declarations of loyalty. Alien nobles who had been skeptical moments before now approached to offer their congratulations, recognizing the political winds. But Amara barely noticed them. As Cale took her hand, the same hand that had once stitched his wounds in a tiny medical pod, she felt the weight of destiny settling around them. This wasn't just a personal choice. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between two worlds. Emma ran up to hug her legs, grinning with excitement. Does this mean I get to live in space, Mama? Sometimes. Amara laughed, lifting her daughter. But we'll visit home too. Can I learn to fly spaceships? We'll see. Both Amara and Cale said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. As the celebration continued around them, alien and human voices joining in harmony for perhaps the first time in 50 years, Amara allowed herself to believe that they had a chance. The peace was fragile, built on the unlikely foundation of a nurse's compassion and a king's trust, but it was real. And sometimes, that was enough to change the galaxy.